Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and the Zodiac forecast for week commencing the 14th of April. I'm going to share some standout details to look out for. Then on screen, the event chart right at the start of the week, which is always influential and provides a backdrop for the whole 7 days. I'll then go through each of the key influences of the week, frame by frame, to give you a clear picture of what to expect collectively this week. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces that you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to sub, please help the channel to thrive and do so now, but also please click or tap the bell notification symbol. I have a new free natal horoscope to share with you. It's absolutely stunning. You'll get your big three of the ascendant, sun and the moon, but also you'll get all the other planetary positions, but the houses they're in and the relationships they share. It's very, very good. Please see below to download that. But also you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. Got a new feature there too. I'm providing the overview of the primary astrological influence for each day. That helps you to get the big picture, but also enjoy your zodiac forecast too. Again, please see below for more. I am a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials. Another new service is my astrology video readings. They're proving really popular. Please see below for more about those too. As ever, there's my long-standing 30% off written forecast offer, which you can order in terms of whole sign, draconic, solar if you don't know your time, or Placidus. Please see below for more on that too. So the big details of this week is that we're feeling the energy of the Libra full moon in a big way, because the backdrop of that is for 2 weeks. So as we come into this week, it's very much about balancing what we give and what we get. Ironically, the ruler of the sign of Libra, Venus, which was in a tense angle to that event, has now gone direct. Does that mean that things are going to ease around relationships and finance? Well, I'm going to share with you why that might not be quite as pat as we'd like. At the end of last week, the Sun and Chiron also coasted into a conjunction, but they're still in touch through the first half of this week. I'll be unpacking that too. Now, Wednesday is really significant because Mercury returns to the sign of Aries. But why it's significant, because it was last there on March the 30th, it's not just that it's coming out of the retrograde by returning to Aries. It merges with Neptune for the first time in our lifetimes in the sign of Aries. If you're a creative, it's magnificent. If you're wanting practical traction, it could prove elusive. Now Mars, the ruler of the sign of Aries, returns to the sign of Leo. It's not been there for 15 weeks since the 6th of January. Mars in Cancer has not been easy at all. So Mars returning to Leo, where it's very proud and potentially loud, I feel is a very good thing. And of course, Mars rules the third decan of the sign of Leo, so it has an attachment and a connection to the sign energetically. But as the week draws to a close on Saturday, it's the Sun that's moving, returning to Taurus after 11 months. But the Sun and Mars are squaring off as the cosmic curtain comes down on this week. So I will go through that with you too. On the screen now, you can see the event chart right at the start of the week. As ever, we need to be mindful of the position of the luminaries. There's the Sun at 24 degrees in Aries, but you can see still very close to Chiron. So more to share on that. But the Moon is in the sign of Scorpio, where she's in her full. So not the greatest location, but she's also squaring up as we enter this new week to the modern higher octave ruler of the sign of Scorpio, Pluto. So there could be some intensity as we go into this week, maybe even some jealousy, because Pluto in Aquarius is really pushing us all to reconnect in a new and fresh way. And it's going to be a long process, and perhaps the Moon in Scorpio is more about attachment and ownership, which Pluto may resist. And also when it comes to those relationships, as I mentioned, Venus is direct, but look at that connection to the position of Saturn. So there's more effect going to come from their alliance right through to the end of the month. So I mentioned that the Sun reached an exact conjunction with Chiron over the weekend. But if we cast our mind back all through March and the first week of April, the ruler of the sign of Aries, Mars, in its full at that point in the sign of Cancer, was squaring up with Chiron. So Chiron can be about vulnerabilities, but it can also be about our superpower. People with Chiron in Aries could be brilliant at encouraging other people to live in the moment. Ironically, they may find it more difficult to celebrate their own individuality. So as we go into this new week, that square with Mars, which I feel was pounding the vulnerability of Chiron, and perhaps Mars itself was actually being very reactive and triggered because of fear, what we've got is the Sun through to Wednesday is very close to Chiron. So we have a chance to think about the whole concept of our identity. And the full moon in Libra, in a way, was asking us to get a balance between what we want as individuals, but also being conscious of where we're connected to others. If that was out of sync, that's where attention needs to go. Now, because of that conjunction between Venus and Saturn, which does continue through to the end of the month and is exact again for the third time on the 25th, there still may be some things that are going to come into the open, because the 12th house can be about secrets. It can be about what we don't necessarily want to be public knowledge, but it can also be about where people may not be sincere. So in traditional astrology, secret enemies. So when it comes to relationships of all kinds, if you're feeling that there's a lack of trust or transparency, do tune into that very carefully. You can see also that Neptune is very close to a sextile with Pluto. They're actually going to come into a much closer connection in the last 10 days of May, but it is there. And as I mentioned, Mercury is going to move forwards this week on Wednesday back into Aries, but combine with Neptune. So if you are a maker or a creator and you've got a passion for something that you want to start afresh, or you want to inject new energy into an ongoing plan, idea or project, that is very positive. But Neptune, of course, can be a very dreamy influence. Mercury is much more about what we talk about, the message. It can be about how we analyze things. So it can be about precision for its rulership of the sign of Virgo. So in Aries, it can be a bit impatient, but I feel that Neptune slows that down a little bit, makes it more sensory. Could be good, could be a little more challenging, just depends. But Mercury moves forwards towards the end of this week and angles up brilliantly with Pluto. So if something does feel a bit confusing when Mercury first meets with Neptune, by the end of this week we have a great opportunity to find that clarity. But I feel that Mars moving into Leo is really significant. We are going to see Mars, as it moves forwards, start to clash with Pluto, but that won't happen within 3 degrees this week. What we do get with the Sun arriving back in Taurus on Saturday is a square between Mars and the position of the Sun in Taurus. Now, Taurus can be about life foundations. It can be about our values, our self-worth. It can be about food, agriculture. It can be about making and creating. Very sensuous, of course, with Venus, the ruler. So our desire to enjoy the good things in life can be amped up. So the square with Mars, which can be quite outrageous at times in Leo, certainly a seeker of pleasure, could see us feeling much more spontaneous. Now, there's been a lot of the narrative recently about caution about finance, and totally understandable. The cost of everything has gone up hugely in recent years, and that's made us perhaps much more conscious of budgeting. But we may decide to give ourselves permission to just go for it as this week draws to a close. And if you are someone with spare money and you do like a little bit of a flutter, the link between the second house and the risk taker Mars in the 5th can bring out our more speculative risk-taking tendencies. So if that's the sort of thing that calls out to you, that may be very alluring. But the other thing that can happen is that Mars in Cancer has been perhaps at times a bit of a soggy, moody, reactive, bit of a passive-aggressive influence. We've seen a lot of aggressive emotion being exchanged internationally for sure. And I feel that Mars moving back into Leo, the flame is relit of where Mars is much more effective. So if you are someone who's a performer, a singer, you love karaoke, you're an artist, you're on stage, you are someone who is very industrious in terms of presentation, you have a touch of drama about the way you approach things, you can really come into a fine stretch of form, and that's lovely. But there is that clash with the Sun, and that could make us all a little bit more impulsive as this week draws to a close. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. Aries, last week's full moon may have thrown up some complex situations which you may still be considering. Because on one hand, the Sun and its application to Chiron are asking you to be very single-minded. Neptune's asking you to let your imagination flow, and once Mercury rejoins you at the heart of the week and merges with Neptune, the chance to combine your spark in terms of your ideas with your flair, but also your passion, is really heightened. But I feel the real ignition point of this week is going to come when on Friday, Mars, your ruler, returns to the sign of Leo. Mars left Leo on the 6th of January, and ever since then you may have felt or experienced really quite a lot of frustration, and especially through March and the first week of April, as Mars was in that direct and rather challenging right angle with Chiron in your sign. So you're going to pick up pace and you're going to pick up momentum as this week goes on, particularly with Mercury then breaking free of the more dreamy vibe of Neptune, but then linking in a very decisive way to Pluto. And Pluto's in the part of your chart that's to do with your long-term plan. Mercury in your sign is going to help you to move into the moment, and Mars moving into your 5th house is going to help you to showcase the more outgoing, demonstrative and charismatic parts of your nature. I feel you have been going through quite a lot of uncertainty, low vitality, confusion around certain involvements, perhaps even processing past relationships that weren't easy. But even on the back of last week's full moon, there may be someone who still feels you're not tuning into them as much as they want, and they could have a point. But sometimes in life, we have to do what's right for us first. And if you feel you're giving your power and energy away too much, in being too concerned about what other people think, I think by the end of this week, you're going to be regaining your autonomy, regaining your agency, as they say these days. And I think it's going to be absolutely brilliant for you. So expect to roar back into much more vigorous action as this week draws to a close. However, if there has been someone who's not quite seeing it as you are, the fact that Mars, by the very end of this week, is starting to go directly opposite Pluto suggests that there could be a very intense, even challenging conversation. But you know, ironically, it could even see you attracted hugely to someone you don't necessarily find that easy to get along with. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Taurus, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast begins with your ruler Venus now travelling direct, but still very close to Saturn. Saturn's asking you to think very carefully about certain associations, but also about your long-term plan. And because Venus can, your ruler, be to do with money, that can be part of your calculus too. But you may not necessarily want to discuss things particularly openly with anyone else, or if you do, it will be only with your most trusted inner circle. Because right at the start of this week, the moon, although it's in your sector of relating, it's actually tangling with Pluto, the planet of power. And even if someone means well to you, if they see a situation differently to you, it could be that how you feel it can be a little bit tender. In fact, once Mercury returns to the sign of Aries in the middle of the week, your imagination can be incredible. You may have the most vivid dreams this week. But because of the Sun's alliance to Chiron, if there are any parts of your psyche that are still a little raw, or perhaps you have some vulnerabilities, many of us do, this can be a week when you want to gently embrace them and just work through them. So anyone around you who may be a little brash or a bit directive may not actually be your cup of tea. However, what is going to happen is that if you have an interest in healing, in meditation, in natural medicine, or anything to do with the psychic sphere, you can be absolutely engaged, gripped by those things. And what's going to happen is that Mars, which has been in a very assertive part of your situation in terms of everyday communication since the 6th of January, that's moving into the part of your chart to do with your home. Now, if there are some practical outstanding jobs or improvements that you'd like to make, you can definitely get cracking on those pretty soon. But I feel that the desire to do that is going to get much stronger once the sun arrives in your sign on Saturday. And even if you have experienced some self-doubt or uncertainty or even some inertia of late, the sun moving into Taurus can help to bring you into the moment. But the moment needs to work with that energy of Mars, because Mars could in some ways not trick you, but kind of urge you to make a move quite quickly on a situation that you've been mulling over, when I feel that you need a little bit of time to build up some momentum. Also, by the end of this week, Mars goes into a bruising battle with Pluto. One of the things I would say to you, whether you're discussing finances, your job, your business, any close relationship, especially if it's a family relationship, try to be as flexible as possible, because Saturn being so close to your ruler Venus could make you a little bit resistant if you feel that someone's not being quite as fair as they could. You may have a perfect point, but if they see your response as being very cool or even very reactive, it's not actually going to solve the issue. So just hear what people say towards the end of this week, because as Mars goes opposite Pluto, that's quite a strident opposition. We had that opposition when we entered cardinal quadrant 4 from the winter solstice last year, and we can see in the world since then a lot of very abrasive, forceful energies, which doesn't necessarily help to solve the issues. So what you can do with Mars by the end of this week, however, is just start to gain a little bit more sense of the things that may have been put off around home improvement, that you're developing a plan to put those things right. But I wouldn't put yourself under too much pressure to get cracking with that absolutely in this week, because this week is very much a transitional week, and I feel you need time just to let your emotions percolate through and just be aware, particularly of things like trust, who's really as loyal as they could be, who are the fair weather players in your world, but also giving yourself time to just have some moments of peace and tranquility. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope, or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. So Gemini, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast continues to see a lot of action in your connection to the wider world. Maybe professionally, maybe in your local community, perhaps you provide some kind of support or leadership role, or perhaps voluntary work too, and those demands are going to continue to be quite heavy right through to the end of this month, as Saturn shepherds Venus, the relator and the money planet, right through to the end of its journey in this phase in the sign of Pisces. But as you do start this week, the energy in the part of your chart to do with your alliances, your network, comes from the Sun, Chiron, but also Neptune. That's still very strong, but I feel the full moon last week saw you having to juggle where you applied your time. Maybe some of your energy needed to go towards your work situation. Maybe you do feel that you haven't had the opportunity to spend as much of your spare moments with the people you really want to be with. But the chance to reconnect with some significant people presents itself from Wednesday, where Mercury, your ruler, returns to the friendliest part of your scope. But it merges with Neptune for a few days. That can be an inspirational link, to be honest, if you are someone who really has got a long-term plan, which is much more visionary. It's not so much rooted in the more practical realm. It's much more about what inspires you. That gives you a significant celestial leg up. But it's towards the end of this week, because Mars moves into a very positive location for your sign in particular on Wednesday, but Mercury inches forwards and links back to Pluto in the part of your chart to do with knowledge, travel, but also your ability to articulate your message in a very powerful way. Pluto is about power, but it can be about revelations. If you never had an opportunity when you were younger to have formal education, or you would like to add to your professional skills, that position of Pluto is going to be really significant over the next few years. And if that all knits into what you're seeing you need for your future, Mercury's link with Pluto can trigger some thoughts or some actions which can be very decisive, particularly with Mars returning to the sign of Leo, because that feeds into the quick third house energy, which is very much part of your sign. But Mars in the third house can also be good for physical movement. So if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's a prompt to get on the move a lot more. Now by the end of this week, as the Sun makes its way into your 12th house, which can be more reflective, and there probably will be moments over the next few weeks when you do want to just have some time to let recent events just work their way through you. But the opposition between Mars and Pluto, which presents itself at the end of this week, could see you in great form if you're someone who loves debating or loves sharing things online, or you are someone with a great knowledge. That will be a time when you can be very passionate about sharing the information you have. The trick with Mars opposite Pluto is to be aware that some people may see you as being somewhat too forceful. But of course, the Sun's move into the sign of Taurus also is interacting in a broad T-square with the position of Pluto and also Mars. So if you are discussing something, be conscious of whether you may be reacting to something because something within you, some kind of vulnerability, does get triggered. So just be conscious of that. Over the next week or so for us all, we are going to see some intense energy because the Sun in Taurus, the position of Mars in Leo, and also Pluto in Aquarius are all in fixed signs. Your natural mutability, your ability to flex and flow, is actually going to be a real asset. You may encounter other people who seem to be a bit intractable in their approach, and if there are any powerful opponents in your particular sphere, they may show up towards the end of this week. So a degree of subtlety will be just as important as being very assertive. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. So Cancer, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast could still see you at the beginning of the week processing the potency of that full moon in the sign of Libra, which of course is about balance, but it's also about relationships. The most important relationship we can have is with ourselves. The Sun, and particularly the solar eclipse of the 29th of March, has been pushing you to aspire to a big goal, to reach a summit. Also Mars, the planet of thrust, for 2 months from the 5th of September last year and also again from the 6th of January this year, has also been asking you to be very single-minded. But that lunation may have thrown up some doubts, particularly if you're not necessarily enjoying whatever goal or ambition you've been working towards. Because at the end of the day, it's that soul connection which is so important to Cancerian people. Now your moon has moved on into a very warm and affectionate part of your chart at the start of this week, your sister water sign of Scorpio, but that's not the moon's strongest position, and it is conflicted by Pluto. Creatively, even if financially it has worked for you, this could ask you some questions. And because although Venus is now travelling forwards, it's still being escorted by Saturn right to the end of this month. So when it comes to contracts or arrangements or alliances, if you don't feel it's in touch with your higher purpose or truth, that can create even more perhaps uncertainty or self-questioning. Now, of course, this is a week when Mercury returns to the sign of Aries, and it actually forges a mesmeric link to Neptune initially, and that could inspire you to perhaps change direction somewhat towards something that does in some ways say a part of you that gives you a greater sense of personal satisfaction. As the week goes on, Mars also finally leaves your sign, punching back into Leo. Now, if you've been really industrious since last September, the chances are this could be a point when you can see how far you've come financially, and that can be very gratifying. But on Saturday, the Sun moves into the part of your chart that's much more to do with your higher purpose that goes beyond goals. It's much more to do with your your need to be as authentic as possible with the deeper part of your being. So it's not so much about what we earn, the position, the status, and so forth. And Mars, despite being for you in your second house of everyday money, is clashing with that more idealistic position of the Sun. So as this week draws to a close, Mercury moves forwards and forges a very precise link to Pluto in a way which can help you to really cut through to what's important to you. If you feel you need to change course professionally, by the end of this week, it wouldn't be a huge surprise. You could also become much more conscious of who perhaps takes you somewhat for granted, especially in your friendship circle. If there is someone who perhaps tends to be a little bit assumptive about your generosity and perhaps even your financial support, that could be something that also becomes a bit more of a tense issue as the week draws to a close, because as the Sun moves into that more idealistic, long-term and friendly part of your chart, it's not just going to clash with Mars, it's also going to clash with Pluto. So the Mars position is everyday money, Pluto's your longer term financial situation, but the Sun is asking you on the back of that moon, are you in balance in the way you need? Are you approaching your worldly interactions in a way which really sates your emotional senses, gives you peace of mind? Or are you doing something that actually you feel a bit dislocated from? It doesn't quite work for you. And those are the questions that will come up by the end of this week. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Leo, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast suggests some conversations may be to the fore on the back of the full moon, and some of them may be financial. But when it comes to gaining momentum with your plans, the fact that Mercury returns to your sister fire sign of Aries, but Mars returns to your sign, are both fabulous developments. They're going to give you an extra spark, particularly as they're forging a tremendous sextile. If there are things that you're feeling really inspired and enthusiastic about, you can get your message across with aplomb. Also, as the week draws to a close, with the Sun climbing right to the top of your chart, the next 4 weeks can be crucial for your ambitions and for success. Just be conscious, however, that as Mars returns to your sign, it is going to go face to face with Pluto. One of the things you perhaps need to just be conscious of is trying a little bit too hard. Indeed, right at the start of this week, it's the moon that's in conflict with Pluto. And if you do feel a bit disorientated initially, then that could come out in a close partnership. By the end of the week, if you're wanting something differently for your future, especially professionally and career-wise, and someone close to you doesn't quite get the excitement that you're feeling, that could also create some tension. Now, Mars opposite Pluto is a very, very powerful link. And that can give you an immense amount of determination to assert what you want. But it's important sometimes when we're faced with people's different viewpoints to us that we don't just crush that viewpoint. We might get a short-term win, but what it can set up is a degree of resentment which is not quite so obvious. So as much as you may need to bring someone up on board with you, perhaps the best way to do that is to use that inner drive, but with a little bit of subtlety too. But before Mercury forges that amazing link with Mars, it is also going to link very productively to Pluto too. So if you are thinking long term, try to explain what it is you want to achieve in a very clear way, and that hopefully will provide reassurance to whoever could, and it's only could, be resisting what you hope to achieve. Now, in a more personal context, if you are wanting to dive in, be more interactive, take the lead in terms of interest, your social life, or even romantically, Mars moving into your sign is going to give you an absolute blast of extra vitality, but also self-belief and that sense of gorgeousness, which is so important to you. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. So Virgo, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast could still see you thinking about how you may make some improvements in terms of your costs, perhaps be a little cannier with your money and how you squeeze a little bit more out of it. But also the second 8th house axis can be about who we're committed to, who we're invested in, who we're attached to. If there's someone you're very close to, with Venus now going forwards, but still very close to Saturn, but forging a fantastic link to Mars at the start of this week, if there is something you're planning with someone where it feels right, but also financially it's very clear, you could take a big step forwards at the start of this week. However, the converse can be true with your ruler Mercury moving midweek and aligning with the dreamy Neptune. So if you're grappling to get some kind of details or clarity around a business matter or a shared financial affair, that could prove a little frustrating. Just be assured that by the end of the week, Mercury moves forwards and forges a very, very precise link with Pluto, and that's going to help you to use your natural gift for analysis in a very precise and penetrative way. Really excellent and helpful development. However, Mars, the planet of thrust, is going to be moving into a delicate area on Friday. Through to the middle of June, things could be a little turbulent. You may be surprised by how some old issues or unresolved emotions do come up in unexpected ways during that period of time. Once Mars moves into your sign in the middle of June on the 17th, you'll be prepared to roar forwards in a very much more focused way. But if there are some things that are unresolved, use this opportunity with Mars's help to work through them and release them. That could be old hurts, old disappointments, maybe some things that you thought had been dealt with can come up from your subconscious and affect your mood in a little bit of an up and down way. Fortunately, however, on Saturday, the Sun makes its arrival in your sister Earth sign of Taurus. Now that's very much about being freer, more adventurous, more independent. If you have been thinking about firming up a travel plan, it will happen in the next 4 weeks. But also, if higher education has been appealing to you, or a new professional qualification, that too can be something that really captivates your interest. But the key with the Sun in the 9th house is to know that it can be to do with escapism. And with Mars in such a psychological area, also going face to face with Pluto in a physical area, if you are feeling a bit burdened down by life, weary, not quite as energized as you would like as this week draws to a close, one of the things I would say to you is that a change can definitely be as good as a rest. So if you're tempted to do something really spontaneous and even break away from that side of you that can be incredibly applied to your responsibilities and obligations, do you know, it could do you just the power of good. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally, please see below for more. So Libra, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast comes on the back of the potency of the Libra full moon. How did you find it? Was there a relationship issue that needed to come out into the open? Or for you, was it more about drawing people's attention towards how you saw a situation and making them more conscious that they needed to lean into your perspective, not the other way round, which is sometimes the case. That's your great gift. Now, of course, your ruler Venus has been released from the retrograde, but it's not been released from the clutches of Saturn. So relationships generally could require still some care through to the end of the month. Once Venus returns to the sign of Aries, you'll know exactly how the whole process has played out. But what you do get this week is the arrival back in your 7th house of relating of Mercury. When Mercury's in the 6th house, it can create brittleness. But what we can get in the sign of Pisces is brittleness, but also confusion and maybe some dishonesty. Mercury moving back into your 7th house helps you in its conjunction with Neptune for the first time in our lifetimes in Aries, helps you to assert your boundary, but with a degree of delicacy, because Neptune can just soften the energies of Mercury, but not in a bad way. If you're a little bit uncertain about how to go about something, initially that could create a sense of confusion. Just be assured that by the end of the week, Mercury's interacting with Pluto, now in the part of your scope to do with your personal actualization in terms of your charisma, and that link suggests that you could punch through and get across your message with aplomb. Now, also on Friday, Mars is going to make the transition from your sector of ambition to one which is much more to do with your social world, but also your network, your collaborations, which is something you have a natural gift for. Perhaps people have been surprised since the 6th of January, and before that for 2 months, from the 5th of September to the start of November, about just how much more assured you've been in terms of chasing big targets. But you get an opportunity now to think more about how you connect to others. Mars can be about desire, clearly, can be about our identity, ego, but the 11th house is much more collegiate. It helps you and links you to other people in a very positive way. But the Sun's move into the sign of Taurus, which can be about everyday money, our values, but in your case in the 8th house, where you connect to others, Mars and the Sun are in a right angle as this week draws to a close. And in fact, as Mars edges forwards, it's also opposing Pluto too. So it's a T-square. Because that T-square is all in fixed signs, when it comes to your hopes, the position of Mars, how you manifest your personal needs, Pluto, but how it connects to others, the Sun, try to stay as flexible as possible, because that fixed energy can create resistance, and that therefore can create some tension. If, however, you are a very creative person and you're wanting to do well financially, I feel the tension of that T-square could in some ways push you towards making more of the ideas you've been generating and being much more entrepreneurial, particularly over the next month. Having the Sun in the 8th house can also see you wanting to squeeze a little bit more out of your assets. So the cannier side of your nature is going to be to the fore, but the Sun in Taurus for you can be about transformation. So if you're working on a relationship matter, it could get deep in the next few weeks. But as I say, once your ruler Venus gets back on the 1st of May into your opposite sign, that's when you're really going to get the clarity, and perhaps the 5th of May when she comes out of shadow, of exactly how that relationship matter will unfold. Now that could be personally, but it could equally be around a contract. It could be around a new association that you're developing. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. So Scorpio, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast could see you initially feeling a little tender. It was a very sensitive full moon. Also, the moon in your sign right at the top of the week squares off with Pluto, further amping up the potential for tension. If, however, you've got a much clearer picture of where you are at the moment and the energies from the planets are not quite influencing you in such a tender way, the fact that your traditional ruler Mars starts this week in a stunning alliance with Venus and Saturn suggests you could take a big step forwards. But in order to achieve your goals, you'll need to work through the practical processes. And with Mercury moving at the heart of the week and merging with Neptune, that can blur some of the need for clarity. The good news is that Mercury then goes on to reconnect with Pluto itself by the week's end, and that could provide a lot more certainty for you. The other big two pieces of news for you is that Mars, your traditional ruler, does return to your sector of goals and ambitions. Through to the middle of June, if you really have got something that you're clear about that you want to achieve, you can assert yourself with an enormous amount of authority. It's just that, just as Mars returns to that area where it was last from the start of November through to the first week of January, the Sun moves into your sector of relating. Now, the Sun and Mars therefore square, but also the Sun squares off to Pluto. So in other words, your two ruling planets of Pluto and Mars are in opposition as this week draws to a close, and it could put some emphasis on a relationship, whether it's at home, in the family, someone you're very close to, or professionally, and being as diplomatic as possible will really be important, because there's part of you that may just want to get to your target in a very quick one-step way. But with the Sun in the 7th house, you need to bring people with you in a collaborative way. But just know that Mars will break through from that opposition with Pluto, which could see you trying a little too hard. And once he does, there is a big window of opportunity there for you over that time through to the middle of June. And if you have got a big idea that you want to go for, whether it's around a business, whether it's around a career move, your desire to see that through, but also your passion and energy to make it happen are really going to be enhanced. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Sagittarius, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast could still see you weighing up your exact plan. You could feel in some ways that you're at a bit of a crossroads, or perhaps you've got more options than you know exactly what to do with. But at least with Mercury moving back into your fellow fire sign of Aries at the heart of the week, that's really promising, because Mercury in the 4th house, and particularly in Pisces, is a very squidgy and a rather confusing influence. Now, ironically, of course, it then connects with Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, but this time in Aries for the first time ever in our lifetimes. But what an inspirational combination. If you are someone with ideas that you're enthusiastic about, you can really find that they are going to be amplified. By the end of the week, Mercury's arcing to Pluto. If you need to express the ideas that you have, you can do so not just with enthusiasm, but clarity, but also conviction, and that can be very impressive to others. The other big thing that I really like about this week for you personally is that Mars returns to your fire sign of Leo. So Mars is in touch with Mercury as well, and that also helps you to be passionate about your ideas. But Mars moving into the ninth house accents that part of your nature that does like freedom, does like independence, can be very adventurous, likes to break out, be more spontaneous, and all that energy that's been in the sign of Pisces recently, which has been quite draining. There's been a lot of emotional issues. Saturn's been oppressing that part of your chart the last couple of years. So Mars moving back into your ninth house can create excitement. It's just that, just as that happens, the Sun, of course, moves into a very practical area, very much to do with duties and obligations. So if some of your duties and obligations are really in some ways getting in the way of your expression of your more natural, freer spirit, there may be something that you'll want to change. At the very end of the week, it's not a great time to promise to do something that you don't really feel invested in, because you could end up feeling somewhat resentful. So a bit of escapism could call out to you towards the end of this week, but you may be juggling because there may be some chores or obligations that you feel a bit unable to break free from. Now, the Sun, but also Mars, are also connecting to Pluto. So we have a T-square towards the end of this week. If there's something you feel very passionate about, and you often do, you could find yourself having a big conversation as the cosmic curtain comes down on this week, where someone doesn't quite get the big picture, and that can be irritating, because not only can you see that big picture, you can also understand the detail beneath it, and that means that you could come up against someone who just could knock you off your attention from what's really important to you. So I think as the week draws to a close, just try to do things that liberate you. Do fulfill your commitments, but don't get drowned by them. I think it's important to have some space. Very important to Archers as this week draws to a close. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope, or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Capricorn, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast sees the big picture in your chart for the rest of this year in some ways competing with more immediate energies. The big picture has seen your ruler Saturn applying to a whole series of players in the third house of your chart, which is quick communication, connections with people immediately around you, your belief systems. But Mercury, the communicator, moves out of that area this week and into your fourth house, which is where the Sun, Chiron, is, but also now Neptune. Saturn, your ruler, is going to join them on the 25th of May. So for the rest of this year, Saturn, and to a lesser extent Neptune, are going to be hovering between your fourth and third houses. So how you think, but how you feel is really very important. The full moon last week, which comes into this new week, you come into this new week with, was about the delicate balance between your feelings, your environment, how heard you feel by people you're close to, but also your connection to the wider world. So when the Sun makes its way on Saturday into the part of your chart that's to do with fun, sociability, showcasing your charisma, your talents, flair, that's all lovely, but still be guided by how things feel. Because when Mercury returns to Aries on Wednesday, it merges with the drifting, dreamy vibe of Neptune. And if you're not quite sure about how some things feel, it's going to be difficult to embrace the more playful, outgoing vibe of the Sun. Also, ironically, at the start of this week, Mars, which has been really asking you to assert your boundaries around relationships since the 6th of January, it starts the week in a fantastic link with your ruler, but also with Venus now going direct. So if your communication is being heard and is clear with someone, you could forge a really amazing bond right at the start of this week or strengthen one that's been developing. But then Mars moves, like the Sun and Mercury, and Mars moves into a part of your chart which through to the middle of June can see you much more focused on desire. Now the desire for you could be around finance, it could be around intimacy, it depends on your unique situation, but each time these energies are triggered, take it back to that bigger picture vibe. How does it feel? Because the sign of Capricorn is very much about being hardworking, being disciplined, being very applied, and the moon in your sign in some ways isn't at her best. She's in her detriment. So having fourth house energy is asking you in a respect to become a little bit more au fait with the feeling side of life. It's not to say that Capricorns generally don't have emotions, because of course you do, but you can be very focused on seeing things in a very pragmatic way. So that gathering of players in the sign of Aries, including the Sun merging with Chiron at the start of this week, suggests if you're not listening to your instincts, if you're ignoring them, or you're trying to push forwards with something, but you're going against some inner doubts, that ultimately could sabotage you. So very, very important to be in touch with the more tender, atmospheric, sensitive, emotional parts of your nature, because whichever way you approach things, once Saturn arrives, along with Neptune, they are going to almost compel you to listen to those things more attentively. So towards the end of this week, as the Sun moves into that more playful area, still ask yourself, does this feel right? Then as Mars moves forwards, goes opposite Pluto across your 8 second houses, that's the axis to do with ins and outs around finance, can be your values, can be shared money, but the 5th house could see you wanting to be more escapist and do something in a more impulsive way. For example, kick up your heels, be a bit naughty, splash some cash, because you may be feeling something in a way which needs some kind of diversion or some liberation. So it's a very, very important week. It's a very transitional week. Lots of energies moving very swiftly as you go through the whole 7 days. But the big, big picture for the rest of this year is inescapable. It's about being more in touch with how you feel, and perhaps also your vulnerabilities, whatever other things, whether it's finance, work, relationships, fun, are competing for your attention. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Aquarius, your week commencing the 14th of April suggests that full moon brought up some talking points. Ironically, Mercury, the planet which is very much to do with communication, the messenger, has been in a very blunted location, but also in the watery Pisces, where it's in detriment, has been also pretty close to the restrictive energies of Saturn, your traditional ruler. Now, of course, Venus is still alongside Saturn, has gone direct. Finances, I feel, will still need some care through to the end of this month, but Mercury moves forwards at the heart of the week and darts back into Aries, where it's much happier, but it does merge, ironically, with the modern ruler of the sign of Pisces, Neptune, for the first time ever in Aries in our lifetimes. What that combination can do, however, is enhance your natural imagination. Often Aquarius people are brilliant at seeing the direction of travel, whether it's around fashion, whether it's around music, whether it's around food, whether it's around culture, and that can be enhanced. But if you have something to say, your imagination can be boosted by them. But by the end of the week, as Mercury then links back to Pluto in your sign, but also critically to Mars as it returns to Leo, last there on the 6th of January, returns on Friday. So Mercury and Mars are in a very punchy alliance, but also Mercury to Pluto. But the tricky bit is that Mars is then directly opposite Pluto in your sign. So when it comes to relationships, Pluto in your sign is making you much more conscious of what's really important to you, the individual. Mars in your 7th house through to the middle of June can give you a window of opportunity if, for example, you'd like to date, like to meet new people, forge new connections, because it can make you more assertive. But almost immediately can also see you try a bit too hard, force the pace. And because the Sun moves at the end of the week into the tenderest part of your chart, the 4th house, it's really important as this week closes to just understand the process that's evolving. Because I feel that once Saturn, your traditional ruler, moves into Aries on the 25th of May, that's when you can really stage moving forwards along with Mars's help to connect with people around your ideas, but also get them across with conviction. But right at the end of this week and the beginning of next week, if you rush it, I don't feel it will be particularly helpful. And one of the reasons for that is that Mars will be in Leo, fixed, Pluto's in your sign, fixed, and the Sun will be in Taurus, fixed. So that can create inflexibility, not necessarily from you. It could be that you encounter people that are not prepared to budge, but there's a part of you that if you feel people are being unfair, it can kind of trigger you a little bit. So just be aware that Mars on the 7th house can be a bit corrosive if people feel that we're being too dominating or wanting everything on our own terms. So Pluto opposite Mars is quite the challenging influence. It last occurred towards the end in these two signs of last year. So with Venus no longer in retrograde, Saturn still shadowing her through to the end of the month, patience with finance. I feel that Mercury is going to trigger your imagination. It's going to see the flow of communication improve. But right at the end of this week, although you can punch across your ideas effectively, I wouldn't necessarily expect instant progress at this stage. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more. Pisces, your week commencing the 14th of April forecast begins with the energy of the full moon, still very potent. I feel what that was asking you to do was to make sure that you had a robust sense of your value, your self-worth. That could have been tested and may still be tested by what you perceive as other people's lack of appreciation of that. Could be a line manager, could be a colleague, maybe a partner, family member, because the moon in house 8 could tease into the open someone's criticisms that aren't necessarily or haven't necessarily been obvious. The other thing that's been going on is Saturn in your sign has been so close to Venus in its retrograde, now direct, but also the North Node and Mercury. The great news is that Mercury is going to move at the heart of this week back into the sign of Aries, but it's also going to merge with your modern ruler Neptune. Don't underestimate that how you view life and how you use your talents, which are often more ephemeral, still have great value. Your imagination, for example, your approach to art, the way you can use photography or film in an inspired way, the way you appreciate music, creates an exquisite set of value, and it's important that you feel that value. Also, as Mercury moves forwards this week, linking back to Pluto in a more hidden part of your chart, it will help you to appreciate the series of experiences in life that you've had, the knowledge that you've accumulated. perhaps through past jobs, but just through living, and also get to a firmer point of the value. I feel that Venus going direct, even though it will be shepherded by Saturn through to the end of the month in your sign, will be helpful. Some Pisces people, I think, may reimagine their personal appearance. And maybe in a way, Saturn has diminuted your sense of attractiveness. You haven't felt so good, and that may have fed into your sense of self-worth too. But I feel that actually be bold, be brave about what you want to do. Do you know, at the start of this week, Mars, coming to the end of its journey in a very charismatic part of your scope, actually connects brilliantly to Venus and Saturn. So if there's something that you're doing that is much more inventive, the way that you express that to others can come across with real conviction. But later this week, Mars moves into a part of your situation which is actually going to give you more physical resources. Through to the middle of June, if you have been feeling a bit run down, not surprising with Saturn in your first house of the body, Mars being in your sixth house, which can be to do with having more stamina, is going to be very, very useful to you right through to the 17th of June. However, he does go into an opposition with Pluto. So I wouldn't overdo things. Always be conscious now with Pluto in your 12th house for the long term of looking after your spiritual and emotional resources as well. But also, as the week draws to a close, the Sun darts quickly into Taurus. When I say quickly, I'm using a little bit of poetic license, but seriously, the Sun moving into the sign of Taurus can see life speed up. But because the Sun and Mars are in a right angle, and the Sun and Pluto, it's a T-square. So if you rush into something, that could have consequences. And one of the things I wouldn't try to do with Mars moving into a more virtuous area is try to be so productive towards the end of this week. You know, rushing around the house trying to clear up all the tasks that have been put off. That is a good thing to perhaps think about doing, but give yourself a to-do list and prioritise the things that are really important, but don't make that list too long. Not this week. It's essentially a very complex week with a number of changes, gear shifts, all compacted into the 7 days. So for us all, it will require care. But the thing I want you to do more than anything else is to understand your value. Your value comes not necessarily just from money. It comes from your unique way of viewing life. And even if your financial situation is good, do value what makes you so special. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal birth chart, but also you can subscribe to your free daily written horoscope or book a reading with me personally. Please see below for more.